The wool wagon was already rolling when Clara Voss saw her trunk thrown onto it. It landed hard on the tailboard, one brass corner splitting from the wood. The stage driver looked at the broken corner, then at the dust between his boots, as if the ground had asked him a question he did not mean to answer. "That goes back to Bitter Root," Rafe Cade said, "and so does she." Clara stood in the yard of Larkspur Fold with her gloves still on, and the travel dust still gray along the hem of her brown skirt. Behind her, the stage road dropped away through sage and pale grass. Ahead of her stood a long sheep ranch house with a tin roof, 3 lambing sheds, and a brass bell hanging from a crossbeam near the main gate. She had reached the ranch only 10 minutes earlier. She had not yet been offered water, food, or a chair. Her return ticket was gone. Her sister had kept the purse. If that wagon left with her trunk, Clara would be standing in a stranger's yard with $6, no room, and no one willing to say they had seen her. Rafe Cade was the foreman, according to the driver. He had a narrow face, a trimmed beard, and a way of standing that made other men leave room around him. 2 shearers watched from the side of the dipping shed. Neither spoke when Rafe took Clara's carpetbag from her hand. "Mr. Creed sent for a bride," Clara said. "My letter was answered." Rafe smiled without warmth. "Mr. Creed sent for Miriam Voss." The name struck harder than the trunk had. Clara kept her hands still because she knew men like Rafe watched for trembling. "Miriam is my sister," she said. "Then your sister has sense. She kept away." Rafe nodded at the wagon. "You can ride with the wool bales to Bitter Root. From there you can find whatever road brought you." The stage driver shifted. "Mr. Cade, I was paid only to bring her here." "And now you're paid to look away." The driver looked away. Clara saw the bell cord hanging from the crossbeam. It was braided rawhide, dark from years of hands, and near the top one strand hung loose where no weather could have rubbed it. She noticed small things when she was frightened. She had learned that in the dress shop where Miriam smiled at customers and Clara counted pennies behind the curtain. "My fare was paid through to Larkspur Fold," Clara said. "If Mr. Creed refuses me, he can say so himself." Rafe stepped close enough that the dust from his boots touched hers. "A woman sent instead of the pretty sister does not need a speech from the owner. She needs a wagon before dark." "The plain sister," he said, loud enough for the shearers. "That is what you are." The shearers heard that. One dropped his eyes. The other turned his tobacco in his cheek and said nothing. Rafe took Clara's elbow. She pulled free. The movement was small, but it turned the yard sharp. One mule stamped. The driver cursed under his breath. Rafe's smile disappeared. "Do not make me put you up there," he said. A horse came fast down the east lane. Not reckless, not showy, but fast enough that every man in the yard heard the iron strike. The rider was tall, hat pulled low, coat open over a faded blue shirt. When he reined in, dust curled around his boots and his horse's chest. A pale scar ran from the left side of his jaw down beneath his collar, shiny against skin darkened by wind. He looked first at Clara's elbow, then at Rafe's hand. "Why is her trunk on the wool wagon?" he asked. Rafe's voice changed. It did not soften. It became smoother, which was worse. "Agency sent the wrong woman, Elas. Miriam Voss took one look at the match and sent her plain sister instead." The scarred man turned his eyes to Clara. They were gray, tired, and more careful than any eyes she had seen that day. "Your name?" he asked. "Clara Voss." "Your age?" 28. He nodded once, not because he doubted her, but because he had wanted the answer spoken in the yard. "Did you come here by force?" "No." "Did anyone promise you I would take you as wife whether you suited me or not?" Heat rose in Clara's face, but his voice held no insult. "No," she said. He looked at Rafe. "Then no man here is putting her on a wagon by the elbow." The foreman gave a short laugh. You mean to keep a replacement bride through lambing? I mean to speak with the woman standing in my yard. Laman comes tomorrow to look at the clip. If he hears you took a false bride, he will think the same as everyone else, that the burn took more than your skin. The words struck the yard silent. Elias Creed's face did not change, but Clara saw one hand close on the rein. Mr. Laman buys wool, Elias said. He does not choose who receives supper in my house. Rafe stepped back, but only enough to show he had chosen to. Elias dismounted. He lifted Clara's trunk from the wagon himself. The broken brass corner caught his palm and cut a red line across it. He did not mention it. Miss Voss, he said, you came a long way under a promise I may not have understood. I will not make that worse by pretending a marriage exists. You may have the east room tonight. I will sleep in the lambing shed. Tomorrow, when the stage road opens, you may leave with your fare in your own hand. If you want wages until then, lambing season pays honest. Clara heard the difference at once. Not acclaim, not pity terms. Clear enough that even the silent men could hear them. I can work, she said. Rafe made a sound in his throat. Elias did not turn. Then we will start there. The east room was small, whitewashed, and unused. A narrow bed stood beneath a window facing the lambing sheds. Someone had folded a quilt at the foot and left a tin basin on the washstand, but the air carried a stillness that told Clara no one slept there often. Elias set her trunk inside the door and stepped back over the threshold. You can bolt it from within, he said. Rafe has no key, neither do I. Clara looked at the latch. It was plain iron, newly fitted. You put that on today. Last winter. For whom? The question came before she could stop it. Elias looked toward the window and the brass bell beyond it. For my sister, if she ever came back frightened. Clara heard the sentence settle around them. Not wife, sister. Did she? No. He did not explain. His restraint told more than an explanation would have. At supper, Clara sat at the far end of a long pine table with 3 ranch hands, the stage driver, Rafe, and Elias. No older woman ran the kitchen. No child brightened the doorway. Larkspur Fold was a house built for more voices than it held. The meal was beans, cold mutton, and biscuits hard enough to tap. Clara ate because hunger was stronger than pride. Rafe watched her. Miriam was the beauty, he said to the table. One hand looked at Clara, then looked away too quickly. That small mercy hurt worse than laughter. Elias set down his cup. This table does not rank sisters. The stage driver hid a smile in his sleeve. Clara kept her eyes on her plate because gratitude could be dangerous when it came too fast. I only mean, Rafe said, a man ought to know when he is being mocked. Clara lifted her head. I did not mock him. No, you let Miriam do it for you. The name hurt worse here, under a roof. Elias looked at Clara, not with suspicion, but with a question he would not force. She answered, because she was tired of being handled by the shape of other people's lies. Miriam and I worked dressmaking in Bitter Root. A matchmaker's letter came. She read it first. She said a sheep ranch was no place for her hands. She said I was built for plain work and could take the road if I wanted a roof before winter. Did she give you the bride purse? Elias asked. Clara's fork stopped. Rafe leaned back. Bride purse, Clara said. Elias' jaw hardened. The agency sends a small purse with the woman for return fare or first household costs. I sent one. There it was, not a paper held up in court, not a signature to study, a simple absence that made the room colder. Miriam had smiled too kindly when she fastened Clara's old traveling cloak. You will thank me when you have a house, she had said. Clara folded her hands beneath the table. She gave me a ticket and $6. The table went quiet in the way poor people go quiet around stolen money. One ranch hand muttered. The driver looked toward the door. Rafe said, "Maybe Miriam kept what was owed for the insult." Elas rose so slowly his chair barely sounded. "Rafe, take the night watch." "I have tally books." "Take the night watch." The foreman's face flushed. He left the table without taking his hat from the peg. After supper, Clara carried dishes to the pump behind the kitchen. She did not know whether she was allowed, but the work steadied her. Elas came out with a lantern in one hand and a strip of clean cloth around his cut palm. "You need not earn every breath tonight," he said. "If I stop, I will think. Then I will dry." He took a towel and stood beside her, leaving a careful space between them. The pump squeaked. Somewhere in the sheds, a ewe answered another with a low, restless sound. Clara glanced at his scar and looked away too late. "It does not pain me much now," he said. "I am sorry, I should not have stared." "Everyone stares. You look sorry after, which is rarer." That nearly made her smile. She pressed a plate into his towel. "Rafe said the burn took more than skin." "Rafe says what keeps men smaller than him." "Did it?" Elas dried the plate carefully, for a while. He looked toward the brass bell. "My sister Nomi came to help one lambing season after our mother died. A storm hit late. The bell cord had twisted around the beam. She went out because I did not hear the ewes crying from the far fold. By the time I saw the lantern, the shed roof had gone. I got burned pulling the door, but not soon enough." Clara's hands stilled in the dishwater. "I am sorry," she said again, and this time the words were too small but true. "I closed the east room after that. Then this winter I wrote the agency because Larkspur Fold had become a house where men came to eat and sleep and never had to speak gently." He looked at her then, direct and unguarded for the first time. "That was not a reason to ask any woman to come. I know it now." Clara felt the pull in that confession. Not romance yet, not safety either. Something more dangerous because it asked her to see him as a man who knew his own wrong. "Maybe it was a reason to ask honestly," she said. The shed bell rang once in the dark. Elas turned before the sound died. By morning, Clara understood lambing season did not wait for anyone's dignity. Ewes moved heavy and nervous through the pens. Men carried lanterns before dawn and buckets after sunrise. The air smelled of lanolin, hay, smoke, and damp wool. No part of it matched Miriam's perfume shop dreams. Clara liked that more than she expected. Rafe did not. He came upon her in the second shed, while she was cutting old muslin into strips for chilled lambs. His eyes moved over the neat piles. Playing mistress already. Making use of torn cloth. That cloth came from Nomi's stores. Clara's scissors paused. Rafe had found the place where a lie could enter quietly. "Mr. Creed gave me leave to work here." Elas gives leave to anything that looks wounded. Then he pays when it dies. Clara set the scissors down. "If those strips should not be used, tell him, not me." Rafe stepped closer. "You think he will choose you because you can cut rags?" He asked for Miriam. Men do not forget the woman they thought they were buying. Clara stood. She was not tall, but she had spent years fitting dresses on women who believed money made them larger. She knew how to occupy the space she had. "Then he can tell me so." Rafe smiled. "He will, after Laman sees what you cost him." He left with 2 tally cards tucked under his coat. That afternoon, buyer Laman arrived in a black coat white with trailed dust. He was a small man with sharp boots and sharper eyes. Rafe walked beside him, speaking low, pointing at pens, sheds, haystacks, Clara. Elas met them at the lambing gate. "You are early," he said. "Mr. Cade sent word the yard may be unsettled tomorrow," Laman said. "Did he?" Rafe's face held innocence like a borrowed coat. Laman looked at Clara. I am told your household arrangements may interfere with the clip. Clara felt every hand in the yard hear the word household. Elas stepped beside her, not in front, beside. Miss Voss is working lambing for wages until she decides her road. And the marriage contract? There is none until she wants one and I ask properly. The words moved through Clara with a heat she could not hide. Rafe saw it. So did Elas. He looked away first, which somehow warmed her more. Laman tapped his gloves against his palm. I buy wool from steady ranches. Then look at the sheep, Elas said. Rafe guided Laman toward the west pens, away from the far fold beyond the ridge. Clara noticed, because Rafe kept his shoulder between the buyer and that direction. When she went to the bell after they passed, she found another strand cut. Not worn. Cut. She touched the loose rawhide. The bell was old and heavy, meant to carry sound across wind. If the cord failed, no one in the house would hear the far pens at night. Clara went to Elas. He stood in the tack room counting coins into 3 small piles. He closed his fist when he saw her, not fast enough to hide the shortage. The bell cord is cut, she said. His face changed. Show me. They crossed the yard together. Rafe watched from the wool scales. Laman watched from the pen rail. Elas examined the cord without speaking. He followed the cut strand up to the beam with his eyes. That was not wind, Clara said. No. Who keeps the spare cord? Rafe. Elas said it quietly, but he did not move toward the foreman. Clara understood why when she saw Laman waiting. An accusation now would look like panic. A panic would cost the contract. The contract would pay the men and keep the ranch through summer. Can it be fixed before night? She asked. With new cord. And without. He looked at her hands. Maybe. Clara went to her trunk and took out the only fine thing she owned, a length of strong green binding she had saved from a ruined winter dress. Miriam had laughed at her for keeping scraps. Clara cut it into 3 strips and braided it with the rawhide beneath Elas' hands. They stood close at the bell beam, not touching except where the cord moved between them. Elas' scar caught the afternoon light. Clara smelled leather, wool, and the faint clean soap from his shirt. You should not have to spend your own things fixing my ranch, he said. It was never going to be a dress again. Still, then pay me when you can. He looked down at her. I will. There was nothing flirtatious in it. That was why she believed him. The repaired bell sounded at dusk. A deep bronze note rolled over the pens and came back from the ridge. Men looked up. Sheep shifted. Elas let out the breath he had been holding. Rafe clapped slowly from the wool scales. Fine sound, he said. Let us hope it rings when it matters. It mattered before midnight. Clara woke to a sound that did not belong inside a woman's room. Not the steady bawl of sheep, not the wind along the tin roof, but a scraping below her window. She sat up with her heart already racing and listened until it came again. Wood against wood. The latch held. Elas had said Rafe had no key and neither did he, but locks had never stopped a man who believed a woman was a mistake to be corrected. Clara crossed the room barefoot and took the fire iron from beside the cold stove. She did not open the door. She did not call out first. She went to the window and lifted the edge of the curtain. A boy of 17 stood below it with a feed fork in one hand, and shame all over his face. His name was Penn, one of the younger hands. He had eaten at the far end of supper and never looked at Clara long enough to insult her. Miss Voss, he whispered, don't holler. She raised the sash 2 inches. Why are you under my window? Cade told me to fetch the tally cards from the east room desk. There is no desk in here. Penn swallowed. He said there was. Said Mr. Creed put late you numbers there because he was sweet on you and losing his head. There it was again. Rafe did not need the lie to be clever. He needed men to repeat it while Elas grew tired of defending her. Did you believe him? Penn looked toward the lambing shed, where one lantern burned low. I believed he could fire me. His voice dropped lower. He said if I crossed him, my winter wages would vanish from the book and no ranch within 2 counties would hire a thief. Clara studied him. He was not innocent. He was not powerful either. The wrong was real, but so was the fear behind it. Go wake Mr. Creed, she said. Cade said not to. That is why you should. Penn almost smiled despite himself. Then he ran. Elas came with his coat half-buttoned and his hair damp from sleep. He carried no gun. That more than anything told Clara he had come for truth before punishment. She opened the room door with the fire iron still in hand. Penn confessed quickly, each word tumbling over the last. Rafe had said Clara hid tally cards. Rafe had said Elas would lose Laman unless the cards were found before morning. Rafe had said Penn could either help or leave without wages. Elas listened without interruption. Your wages are not Rafe's to threaten, he said when the boy finished. Sleep in the hay room tonight. Tomorrow you work beside me where he can see you. Penn's shoulders shook once with relief. And the fork? Clara asked. Penn looked horrified and handed it to her, as if it had become evidence against his whole character. When he left, Elas stayed in the hall, outside the threshold. You should not have had to face that. I did not face much. He was more frightened than I was. That does not make it little. The words were plain. Clara had lived around people who made every harm smaller when it happened to her and larger when it cost them. Elas did the opposite. He did not reach for her. He did not turn the night into an excuse to step into her room. He stood in the hall, scar shadowed by lamplight, and honored the line he had drawn. You came without a gun, she said. A gun would have taught Penn the wrong lesson. And Rafe. His eyes went toward the dark yard. Rafe knows I am angry. I need him to learn I am awake. That was when Clara first wanted to touch his hand. She did not. Wanting and choosing were not the same, and for the first time in days she had space enough to know the difference. The next morning, Elas did exactly what he had promised. He put Penn beside him at the west shed and made Rafe watch the boy work under the owner's eye. Rafe said nothing, but the lines around his mouth deepened. Clara saw him count the hands who had noticed. There were only 4, but 4 was more than none. By breakfast, the house no longer felt still. Not alive all the way, not yet, but awake in corners. Clara made coffee because the ranch coffee tasted like boiled rope, and because no one stopped her. A hand named Saul took one swallow and looked offended by improvement. The stage driver asked if she had learned in a hotel. Dress shop, she said. They teach coffee in dress shops. They teach how not to waste what little you have. Elas heard from the doorway. Later, when she passed him with the pot, he said quietly, "That may be the truest ranch lesson anyone has spoken this month." The compliment stayed because it was exact. Miriam had praised Clara only when Clara disappeared into usefulness. Elas saw the work and still looked at the woman. The next day, Miriam arrived. Clara knew her sister's shawl before she saw her face. Blue wool, too fine for the dust, pinned at the throat with the silver brooch their mother had left to both of them, and Miriam had worn as if memory could be tailored to fit one woman only. Miriam stepped down from a hired wagon, with Rafe's hand waiting for her. Clara was carrying a pail of warm mash toward a weak ewe. She stopped in the middle of the yard. Miriam's eyes widened, then softened into the expression she used on customers who had brought too little money. "Clara," she said, "look at you, you are all dust. You kept the bride purse." The words came out before greeting. Miriam's mouth tightened. "You are alive and housed, I see." "You kept it." I slept upright on the stage because I was saving pennies, Clara said. And you wore Mother's brooch while my return money sat in your bag. Rafe shut the wagon door. Careful, Miss Clara. Gratitude looks better on a woman in your position. Elas came from the lambing shed, sleeves rolled, hair damp at the temples. He looked from Miriam to Clara to Rafe. Mrs. Voss, he asked. Miss Miriam Voss, Miriam said, offering a gloved hand he did not take. The woman you wrote for. Clara had expected pain. Instead, a strange calm opened under her feet. Miriam looked beautiful, yes. Even travel dust arranged itself kindly on her. But Elas did not look at her the way Rafe expected him to. He looked like a man seeing the price tag on a lie. I wrote to a woman willing to make an honest home, Elas said. Your sister came. Miriam laughed softly. Clara is useful, I knew she would be, but she cannot stay as your bride. People will talk. People have started. Then send her back with me before talk settles. Clara gripped the pail handle. Back where? Miriam blinked. Home. To the shop where you spent my fare. To the shop I kept alive while you chased a letter. You gave me the letter. I gave you a chance. Rafe stepped in. Miss Miriam came to correct a mistake. The wagon leaves after noon. Clara can ride with her. Elas said, Clara can decide. Miriam's smile thinned. Clara has always been poor at deciding. There it was, the old hand on the old door. The voice that had chosen Clara's dresses, Clara's wages, Clara's place behind the curtain. Clara set the pail down carefully so it would not spill. I decide no. Miriam stared. Rafe laughed once. Then you decide to cost this ranch. He pointed toward the ridge. The far fold gate stood closed. Beyond it, late ewes crowded the fence line, thick with lambs and restless under a rising wall of dust. Elas turned. Why is that fold shut? Because you were busy playing bridegroom, Rafe said. I kept them out of the lower yard so Laman would not see disorder. Those ewes are due. A ewe slammed the far fence hard enough to shake dust from the rails. One lamb would not wait for Laman's opinion. Then your wrong bride had better pray they wait. Elas strode toward the far path. Rafe moved with him, blocking the gate lane. Laman arrives at dusk, Rafe said. If you open that fold and the yard breaks, he drops the price. If you leave them, maybe you keep the contract. Clara saw it then. Not all at once like lightning, but plain as thread pulled from cloth. The cut bell, the hidden tally cards, the buyer brought early, the far fold shut. Rafe did not need Clara ruined forever. He needed Elas to believe keeping her had made him careless. Then Elas would send her away and lean harder on the foreman who had saved the clip. Elas looked at the ridge. Dust thickened behind it. Clara picked up her skirts and ran to the bell. Clara, Miriam called. Rafe swore. The green binding held when Clara pulled. The bell gave one hard note, then another, the sound rolling across the yard. Men came from the sheds. Laman's wagon appeared on the east lane. Sheep answered from the far fold with frightened cries. Rafe reached Clara before Elas could cross the yard. Enough. He caught the bell rope above her hands. Clara did not let go. You cut it, she said. His eyes flashed. You do not know what you are saying. You cut it so no one would hear the far fold. I cut nothing. Elas came up behind him, let go of the rope. Rafe tightened his grip. You listen to me, Elas. That woman was supposed to be gone before she learned where the late ewes were penned. The yard stopped. Even the sheep noise seemed to fall under the bell's last fading note. Penn's face went white. Saul took one full step away from Rafe. The stage driver looked at Clara then, not away this time. Rafe heard himself a breath too late. Laman stepped down from his wagon. The stage driver stood beside him. 2 shearers came from the dipping shed. The shearer who had looked down that morning lifted his eyes and did not lower them again. Miriam touched the brooch at her throat as if every eye had become a hand there. Clara looked at Elas. He was not looking at Rafe. He was looking at her hands on the rope, at the green binding, at the woman his foreman had meant to send away before she could matter. "Open the far fold," Clara said. No one laughed at her voice now. Rafe released the rope as if it had burned him. "She does not give orders here." "No," Elas said, "she gives warning." He moved toward the ridge gate. Rafe stepped in front of him and drew the gate key from his pocket. "You open that fold and Laman sees chaos," Rafe said. "He will cut the contract. You will not pay hands by Sunday. You will not keep the North Band, and she will still be a replacement bride with no purse." It was a good last defense, because it held pieces of truth. Elas looked at the men gathering in the yard. He looked at Laman. He looked at Clara. "The best ram," Elas said to his nearest hand. "Take him to Mott's place tonight. Sell him if Laman cuts price." The hand stared. "Elas." "Do it." Rafe's face changed. He had not expected Elas to pay in blood and wool. Clara walked to him. She held out her hand. "Key." Rafe laughed. "You think I answer to you?" "No," Clara said, "but you answer to the truth you just spoke in front of them." Miriam said, sharp and frightened, "Clara, stop this. Come back with me and let men settle their own business." Clara did not turn. "Men have settled my business all week." Then she did the thing no one expected, because no one in that yard knew how many locked shop drawers she had opened, while Miriam entertained customers. She took the long iron latch hook from the bell post, slid it through the loop of the far gate chain, and twisted with both hands. It did not open the lock. It lifted the chain off the cracked lower staple Rafe had trusted no one to notice. The gate sagged free. Elas was beside her in the next breath, shoulder to the post, taking the weight before it could swing wide and break the ewes into panic. "Easy," he said, not to Clara alone, not to the sheep alone, but to every living thing near him. Clara slipped through the gap first. Dust slapped her face. Ewes pressed toward her, eyes rolling, breath hot and sour. She had no grand skill. She had watched for 2 days. She had listened when Elas spoke of late ewes needing slow pressure, not shouting. She lifted both arms and moved sideways, making herself a wall that bent rather than broke. "Low shed," Elas called. "I know." She did. The low shed door stood 30 yards left, away from the crowding chute. If the ewes reached it, the lambing yard would hold. If they rushed the main gate, Rafe would get his chaos. The first ewe balked. Clara took 1 step back, then another, giving the animal room to choose the open way. Elas held the sagging gate. A ranch hand moved behind the flock, then another, not refusing Rafe for grand justice, not making a crowd scene, simply seeing where the work was and doing it. Rafe shouted, "Hold them, I said hold them." No one obeyed fast enough for him. He ran toward Clara. Elas left the gate to a hand and caught Rafe at the shoulder. Rafe swung. Elas took the blow high on the cheek and did not return it. He held the foreman by the coat and shoved him back against the bell post. "You locked lambing ewes in a dust rise," Elas said. "I kept your contract alive. You risked my flock to rule my house." "Your house?" Rafe spat blood into the dust. "It has been mine to run since Nomi died. You hid in the sheds and let me hold this place together. Then a wrong bride smiles over a bell cord and you remember you are a man." The words were meant to shame him. They did not. Elas looked at Clara moving the ewes toward the low shed, her hair coming loose, her skirt streaked with dust, both arms steady. "I remembered before that," he said. "She just made it worth saying aloud." Laman heard, Miriam heard, the hands heard. So did Clara. She did not look back because the lead ewe had finally chosen the low shed, and the flock was following. When the last ewe cleared the gate, the yard exhaled. Men shut the chain. The bell cord swung green and rawhide together. Laman walked to Rafe. "You sent me word the ranch was unsettled because of the woman," he said. "You did not say you unsettled it." Rafe straightened, trying to gather authority from habit. A buyer does not care how a foreman keeps order. A buyer cares whether a foreman hides late ewes in a dust rise before clip inspection. Laman removed his gloves finger by finger. "I will buy from Creed. I will not take your count." He looked from Rafe to Clara. "The woman you called disorder is the only reason I am still looking at a sellable clip." Rafe looked at Elas. "You cannot run lambing without me." Elas touched the swelling at his cheek. "I just watched Clara Voss do the part you tried to ruin. You dismiss me over a woman sent as a joke." Clara came back through the gate. She was shaking now, not from fear alone, but from the labor of holding steady until steady was no longer required. "I was sent as a trade," she said, "not a joke." Miriam lowered her eyes. Clara faced her sister fully. "How much did you keep?" Miriam's lips parted. She looked toward the wagon, toward Rafe, toward all the faces that had stopped letting her arrange the story. "Clara, how much?" $40, Miriam whispered. The amount moved through the yard like a slap. "And the brooch," Clara said. Miriam's hand went to their mother's silver pin. "It was mine to wear." "It was ours." Elas said nothing. That mattered. He did not rescue Clara from the asking. Miriam unpinned the brooch with stiff fingers. Then she reached into her reticule and drew out a folded purse. Her face had gone pale with anger and shame, but shame was not the cost. The purse was. Clara took neither at first. "Give the money to Mr. Creed," she said. "For the ram he was ready to sell because of me." Elas began, "Clara." She shook her head. "Then he can pay me wages from the ranch, not from my sister's theft." Laman made a small approving sound. Miriam held out the purse to Elas as if the leather burned her. He took it, opened it, counted, and handed it to the nearest ranch hand. "Wage box," he said, "in Clara Voss's name until she chooses where it goes." Miriam flinched at that. Money in Clara's name had always troubled her. "And the brooch?" Clara asked. Miriam looked at the pin. For the first time that day, her beauty cracked into something younger and meaner. "You would take Mother's brooch in a sheep yard." "No," Clara said. "I would take your power to decide what Mother left." Miriam's eyes filled. Clara did not move toward her. Tears were not payment. Not after a ticket, a purse, and a road chosen behind her back. At last Miriam placed the brooch on the bell post. "I have customers in Bitter Root," she said, trying to gather dignity. Laman looked at the stage driver. "Not through my wife's trade circle. Women who sell sisters into false matches do poor fitting work." That was the cost Miriam understood. Her mouth opened. No sound came. Rafe made one last try. He snatched up his hat and pointed at the hands. Penn moved closer to Clara's side of the yard, not Elas, not Rafe's. "Any man who stays will be paid late. Creed is short. Ask him. Ask your new bell ringer if she can feed you." For one moment fear did what Rafe wanted. Men looked at one another. The ranch had bills. Lambing had losses. Romance did not pay wages. Clara saw Elas absorb that truth. Then the stage driver, the same man who had looked away that morning, lifted his hand. "Mr. Creed still need that ram taken to Mott's." Elas looked at him. "Maybe not if Laman holds price." Laman nodded once. "I hold price." The driver took off his hat and faced Clara. "I looked away when he put your trunk on the wagon. I can haul feed from Bitter Root tomorrow at half rate." It was not apology alone. It was action with cost. Clara accepted it with a nod. Rafe saw the yard settling without him. That was when his authority truly left, not when Elas dismissed him, not when Laman refused him, when men began making arrangements around the space where he had stood. Elas took the foreman's key, ring from the nail, by the shed door. "Your wages through last week will be left at Mott's store," he said. "You are not sleeping in my bunkhouse tonight." No hand moved to collect Rafe's bedroll. No one reached for his horse. For the first time all week, his order waited in the air and died there. Rafe's eyes went dark. "You will regret this." "I have regretted keeping you too long." There was no gun, no sheriff, no grand punishment, just a man who had ruled through habit, finding the habit broken in front of those he needed. Rafe climbed onto Miriam's wagon because no other wagon would take him. Miriam did not look at Clara as the driver turned the team. The wagon rolled past the bell post, past the low shed, past the place where Clara's trunk still stood with its broken brass corner. It left empty of Clara. No one cheered. Silence let the yard become a place where people had to decide what came after a wrong. Elas did not step close to her at once. He turned to the hands first. "Pen," he said. The young hand came forward, as if summoned to punishment. "Rafe threatened your wages last night," Elas said. "He did not have that right. You will be paid through Saturday, same as any man, and if you choose to stay, you stay under my word, not under fear of a foreman." Penn's face worked. "Yes, sir." "If you choose to go, you still take what you earned." That second sentence changed more than the first. Clara saw three men hear it and measure their own choices. Elas was not only dismissing Rafe, he was removing the method by which Rafe had held them. Saul, the hand who disliked improved coffee, cleared his throat. "I will stay through lambing." Another said, "Me too." No oath, no speech, just work choosing its proper master. Clara looked at the wage purse in the hand's keeping. It was strange to see her name attached to money in public, stranger still to see no one laugh. "Mr. Creed," she said. Elas turned. "Take the ram money off my wage box if Mott has already been sent for." "No. You were ready to sell him because I was here." "I was ready to sell him because Rafe made a danger, and I had kept Rafe too long." She wanted to argue because debt felt safer than gift. Debt had numbers, gift had hope, and hope had misled many women. Elas seemed to understand. "Your wages stay wages," he said. "If you buy into this ranch someday, we will make that agreement with clear numbers and witnesses. Not today. Today you get paid for work." Laman gave a dry cough. "That is the cleanest business sentence I have heard on this ranch." Clara almost smiled. Then Laman did something that fixed the consequence more firmly than any apology could. He took Rafe's tally cards from the wool table, tore the top sheet with Rafe's private marks in half, and handed the clean bottom ledger to Elas. "I buy by your count tomorrow," he said, "not Cade's." It was not authority validation. Laman held no office, but he held money Rafe had tried to control, and he chose to remove it from Rafe's reach in front of the men Rafe had commanded. Elas accepted the ledger, then handed it to Saul. "You and Penn count with me at first light." Saul blinked. Penn stood taller. Clara watched the old order loosen another notch. Rafe's absence became practical, not merely dramatic. Men had to carry buckets, set rails, check ewes, and count wool without his voice telling them whom to fear. She bent to pick up her mother's brooch from the bell post. Dust had settled in the silver leaves. She rubbed it with her thumb and thought of Miriam wearing it as if inheritance were a performance. Clara did not pin it on. Not yet. She put it in her pocket where it was hers without needing to shine. The sun dropped behind the ridge after that, red through dust. The late ewes settled in the low shed. 2 lambs came before full dark. Clara helped with one and watched Elas handle the other with patient hands. His cheek had swollen where Rafe struck him. "You should put cold cloth on that," she said. "You should sit down." "I will if you will." He almost smiled. Almost was enough to change his face. They sat on an overturned feed box outside the shed while the yard quieted. The brass bell hung above them, green binding bright in the lantern light. "You could leave tomorrow," Elas said. Clara looked toward the road. "Yes." "With your fare?" "Yes." "And your sister no longer holding your purse?" "Yes." He rubbed both hands over his knees, suddenly less sure than he had been facing Rafe. "I want you to know that before I say the next thing." Clara's heart moved hard once. He looked at the sheds, the house, the bell, then finally at her. "I did right for Miriam. I thought I needed a woman who knew how to make a house pretty enough that grief would be ashamed to sit in it. That was foolish." Clara waited. "You came into my yard and refused to be moved like a bale. You worked before anyone deserved it. You asked the questions I had stopped asking. You made me see the difference between a quiet house and a dead one." He stopped, and she saw he was fighting the urge to make the speech perfect. "I do not want any bride," he said. "I want to court you, Clara Voss, if you stay tomorrow, or if you come back next month, or if you make me write to bitter root until you believe me." The clean plainness of it nearly undid her. Miriam would have known how to answer beautifully. Clara only knew how to answer honestly. "I'm afraid if I stay, people will say you settled." "People may say it." "And you?" He looked at her as if the answer cost him nothing because it was already paid. "I will say I was late to understand my good fortune." Clara laughed then once, unsteady and real. A lamb bleated from inside the shed. Elas smiled fully, and the scar pulled at his cheek, and the sight of it made him more himself, not less. He held out his hand, palm up, not touching. She looked at it for a long moment, then she laid her hand in his. Not because she had no road. Because now at last she truly did. That knowledge changed the feel of his hand around hers. It did not close like a gate. It steadied like a rail beside steps she could climb or leave. For once, being wanted did not steal her choice. Morning came clear and cold. The stage wagon stood hitched by the gate after breakfast, headed toward Bitter Root. Clara's trunk had been mended with a strip of tin from the shed roof. Her carpetbag sat beside it. Her $6, the returned purse, and the brooch lay wrapped in cloth in the east room. Elas stood by the wagon, but did not load her things. The driver waited without complaint. That was new. Clara walked from the house wearing the same brown dress, now brushed clean with her hair braided tight. She carried the brooch in one hand. Miriam had not lost a sister forever, perhaps. Clara did not know yet. If Miriam wanted kinship, she would have to meet Clara where Clara stood now, with money in her own name and roads she chose herself. Clara pinned the brooch to the inside of her cloak, where it did not show. Then she picked up her carpetbag and carried it to the wagon. Elas' jaw tightened. He said nothing. She set the bag on the driver's bench. "Take this to Bitter Root." The driver blinked, just the bag. "There are 2 dresses in it Miriam can sell, if she needs to pay back the woman she owes after losing customers." The driver nodded slowly, and the trunk. Yesterday, men had thrown that trunk onto a wagon to send her away. Today it waited by the gate because everyone in Larkspur Fold knew only Clara Voss could decide where it belonged. Clara turned toward Elas. "The trunk stays until I decide whether the east room suits me longer than lambing season." Elas breathed out. It was not relief alone. It was restraint keeping relief honest. "And you?" he asked. Clara walked to the bell post. The green binding had held through the night. She took the cord and pulled once. The bell rang over Larkspur Fold, not urgent, not fearful, just clear. Men looked up from the pens. A lamb answered with a thin cry. The wagon horses stamped toward the open road. Clara let the cord go and faced Elas with the road behind her, and the ranch awake around her. "You may ask me to walk the North Fold after breakfast," she said, "and while we walk, you may ask if Sunday courtship is too soon." Elas came to her slowly, stopping with enough space for her answer to remain free. "Miss Voss," he said, voice rough with held joy, "would Sunday courtship be too soon?" Clara looked once at the wagon, once at the house that was no longer dead, and once at the man who had waited until she could leave before asking her to stay. "No," she said, "but it had better be after the ewes are checked." The driver clicked his tongue. The wagon rolled out carrying only the bag Clara had chosen to send. Elas offered his hand for the walk to the North Fold. Clara took it in the open yard, with dust on her boots, money in her name, the road behind her, and the bell quiet above them because no one needed it to call her home.